Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name's Troy Grable, your host of the Teamalytics Leadership Live series. Each month, our goal is to break down a leadership behavior and have an expert in team and leadership coaching share their perspective on the month's topic. I'm excited to have Teamalytics Vice Chairman, General Robert VanAntwerp, on the show today. General Van retired from the United States Army in 2011 after serving our country for 39 years. He served as the Chief of Engineers and Commanding General of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, overseeing roughly a 40 plus billion-dollar business unit, 37,000 employees that made up of engineers, project managers, operation and construction professionals across nearly 100 locations. General Van now serves on several corporate board of directors and nonprofit advisory boards. He graduated from West Point with his bachelor's degree, his MBA from Long Island University, his master's in mechanical engineering from University of Michigan, and probably, General Van, in my opinion, your biggest achievement is your family. You and your wife raising five beautiful children and who are now raising 23 grandchildren. Welcome and thank you for joining us. But more importantly, General Van, thank you for serving our country.
Well, thanks, Troy. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for having me. And I like nothing better than to be talking about one of these behaviors that we describe so often.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, in our conversation today, General Van will share how criticality, harnessed with grace, is a pillar behavior for high performing teams to possess. Equally, criticality, though, can be destructive amongst teams, but he will explain why it is essential to focus on developing criticality, what outcomes leaders and organizations achieve when they invest in building a balanced culture that allows for critical, transparent, healthy conversations and meetings to happen. But General Van, before we jump into our topic, I'd love for you to expand a little bit more on your background for our audience today. Also, could you share, when did you first learn about Teamalytics and then, what brought you here to Teamalytics?
Yeah, those are good questions. Just a little background. I married my childhood sweetheart. We met at 15 as we were going into high school. And so we've been married 51 years and
Wow,
just been
congrats.
a joy. And you already mentioned the 23 grandchildren. I don't know if that's the end of it or not, but we have one family is actually trying to adopt. They only have six right now, so they're
Oh my,
working on that. So that's great. One of the things growing up, I'll just mention, is my father started a company called Maestro Corporation, which made record changers. A lot of people probably don't even know what a record changer is anymore, but it was my first real look at business and how it was done. And
mm,
by the time he had bought four different warehouses, he just started with four people and ended up having about 600 employees. It was really
wow.
fun. And I was an employee, actually. I was the landscaper. And I learned quickly that a riding mower will cut a lot more grass a lot easier than a push mower. So all of that was good. We're people of faith. We just love, as you described, love being with our grandkids. I grew up on Lake Michigan, boating, as we talked a little earlier, Troy, and
Yeah.
it was just really an awesome thing. Um, the only other thing I'll mention about my upbringing is during my time with my parents, we lived in five different houses. We were renovating.
Mm,
We would renovate and then move to a new one. And I really learned a lot during those times. And my parents were just amazing. And like they would always ask each of the children, we had four, I have two sisters and a brother, what would you like in this house? Well, you want to live in a bunk bed? You want to all that. So we actually got to contribute to the designs of
oh,
it. And
that's
so
cool.
that's kind of my upbringing. Um, about Teamalytics, uh, I first was introduced to Teamalytics when I was chief of engineers. We had we had put out for bids. We had used Gallup for about 15, 16 years to really help us with hiring and with building teams. And we found that it was just getting a little bit stale at that point. We'd been through most of that. So we were at the point, Katrina, we had, billions of dollars of work to do, and we didn't have enough staff to do it. So we were going to hire about 2,500 people. And
Wow.
so we put that out for bids. So there was two real goals. One is let's hire the right people and get the right talent. Number two, let's look for the chemistry that those
Mm,
people would bring. So really gave those strong mandates. But that was the first time I heard about the Teamalytics and the Flippin Group was when they bid on the contract. And
okay.
I was hands-free on that and didn't really have a say in it. I chose not to have a say in it and let my people, contracting people, do it. Um, and so what happened is they chose the Flippin Group to do it. And one of the things that I used to do whenever we would get a new contract, and this was a pretty big contract, was to meet with the chairman of the board or the CEO. And in this case, I met with Mr. Flippin in Nashville. And we were supposed to talk for about 45 minutes, and it went 2.5 hours, as I recall. And at the end of that, we both said to each other, how long have we known each other? And it seemed
Wow.
like it was just an amazing initial connection. And so at the same time as we were getting ready and going into the coaching and all that, Flip became my coach as the
Okay.
chief of engineers. And we put most of the leadership of the Corps of Engineers through the process. And just to build better teams, we wanted to learn about ourselves, wanted to learn about how to build better teams, and then become better leaders as a result of that. So those are kind of what I first learned about Teamalytics, and then where it went from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Well, let's jump into our topic today. Uh, Jump in. You've led and coached many teams to achieve great success over your 50-year career. And I know for certain you have a firsthand perspective of our subject today, the balance of criticality in a company culture. Can you please explain what we mean by criticality and what organizations face when they don't invest in a balanced culture that fosters criticality?
Yeah, that's it's really a great topic, and I love it. If I had to pick one or two behaviors that I love to talk about, this is one of them. And the
Okay.
other one would be nurturing or relational capacity, because they kind of go together with that balance. But
Yep.
I love that you talked about the balance of criticality. And what I guess I'll break it down at first. Criticality is one of the behaviors we measure, and we do it through a 360. We find that it's really good to hear from superiors, peer groups, and subordinates and get a
Mm,
full picture, because not everybody sees us the same. What we've
mm,
learned about behaviors and criticality is no different in that a behavior can be a strength, but it can be a constraint. What it can hold you
mm.
back if it's overused. And so that's why your words and mine would be balance. How do we get the right balance? And so I'll talk a little about what criticality is in our vernacular, and then
Okay,
we can go from there.
great.
It's really, in essence, the reflex to critique. And so anybody looking at this right now, find out, what is my reflex to critique? Am I really fast on the switch, and I might sometimes be a ready, fire, aim person without maybe gathering the facts, bringing the team in? Or am I someone that I'm going to overlook it because I don't like to have conflict? I'm a conflict avoider. So
Mm,
there's two ends to this. And I think what we're really looking for is, what is the right balance, and how
yeah,
important is it that we're able to talk about things in a balanced way that fosters team growth at the same time, um, takes the team to a place that, man, we're all together in this. We're like a group of firefighters together, and
Right.
we each know our jobs, and we're going to work together, and we're going to call someone out. We're going to call ourselves out,
Mm.
if in fact we don't meet what is should be the standard. So just a little bit about what organizations face when they don't have this balanced culture. I think what it really is, it's demotivating, if
Mm.
you will. On one hand, it's demotivating if you think you can never please someone because you don't really know what's expected. So part of the criticality is take a step back. What is expected? And so I think
Yeah.
that's a very important part of it. And when we do know what is expected and what the standards are, and those are questions that when we come into an organization, we need to, if those aren't stated clearly, we need to ask those questions. And on one end, you could be that, wow, you think you can never please anybody, and on the other end, you got people that are thinking no one's being held accountable. Well, a lot of times you would say accountable for what? That
Mm.
if there's a lot of criticality and you don't know what you're accounted for, it's going to be very frustrating and demotivating. So
Yeah.
I think there is that sweet spot that we can achieve, and I found that the great teams do achieve that sweet spot. We all know that leaders are problem solvers, and
Yeah.
there's as I said, this relational capacity and the ability to have criticality in the right measure, balanced properly, they go hand in hand.
Mm.
So I'll just leave it at that for now, and we can go to the next direction you want to go in, Troy.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, as you know, and as we all know, being a great leader is the ability to build strong, healthy, cohesive, high producing teams. General Van, you've personally invested and led those teams. You've observed organizations who've also invested in that transformation of becoming high performing. So, what and how are the right ways we can insert criticality into our company?
Yeah, I think that's a great segue to really what I was talking a little bit about is how do we let people know what our standards and expectations are and all that. And I'm going to use a little example. I'm from North Carolina for those that don't know, and of course we have this school up there called Duke, and one of the longtime coaches actually went to West Point. I was a couple of grades behind him, but his name is Mike Krzyzewski. And I want to give you a book that would be great if you want to read it. And it talks a lot about Krzyzewski's contribution to our men's Olympic basketball team.
Mm.
And the book is called, and I think this is very appropriate, The Gold Standard by Mike Krzyzewski. So the gold standard. So long before Mike Krzyzewski laid out what everybody was going to be responsible for, he spent a lot of time team building first,
Mm.
getting to know everybody, getting them to know each other. And so he would bring the team in, they would have team meals, and they each got to get up, excuse me, and share their background and what they expected and all of that. And so one of the things that we in Team Analytics do, it's very much like Mike did, was build a social contract. So I want to describe a little bit how Mike did it, and then I'll talk about a company that just one of the company. Well, I'm going to talk a little about the Corps of Engineers and how we took
Okay.
that there. And I'll share some of the things that went into the Corps of Engineers social contract.
Great.
Um, First of all, let me give you a little background. In 1992, in the Summer Olympics, that was the first year that professional basketball players could play in the Olympics. So
Okay.
there was very high expectations. And in that year, I think the average margin was 44 points. between the other teams, and we won the gold medal in 1992. But something came off the rails in 2004, and Mike was an assistant coach at that time. And by that time, we'd won a lot of, if you go and look at who won men's basketball in the Olympic Games since 1992, you'll see all the times the United States won it. But in 2004, we didn't even get to the finals. Argentina won the gold medal in Italy, and Mike was an assistant coach. So he started to assess what was wrong there, and what could we do to make that better. And Mike essentially he called it standards. And I want to just quote Mike. He said, with this, in developing teams, I do not believe in rules. I believe in standards. And so rules don't provide teamwork, standards do. And so that stuck in my head as I worked later with the Corps of Engineers on building that social contract. He also mentioned that rules are issued by a leader to a group, and he doesn't think that's the way it should be done, and I don't think so either. Standards are agreed to by the group and lived. And when they do, that document, social contract, really becomes your culture document, but only as far as it is followed and used. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in the thing. So what he did was gather everybody up. He had some players, LeBron James, he had Dwayne Wade, he had Jason Kidd, he had Kobe Bryant. These are just, it was a dream team again for the 2008 Olympics. But as they were starting to build that team up, they got everybody together and they said, we're gonna put, he gave them all a notebook, by the way, and in the front of the notebook, it had a gold medal. It was a picture of a gold medal. And he said, that's the goal. That's the goal. And the second thing was really what their schedule would be and who they would be playing all the way to get to the gold medal. And the third thing, it was blank at first. It just had our standards up at the top. And so that was such an important night when he gathered all the team together. And Mike threw out two things: communication and trust. They got to talk about it, and they got to decide as a team, do we want those to be two of our standards or not? And then he asked each of these players that I just mentioned, what would you contribute, and lead a discussion about that particular standard. And so when they finished, they ended up with 15 standards, or I would call them 15 skill sets in your social contract. And it was really amazing. I'm going to end this sports analogy here with just one thing to show, well, how does it really work? Well, the World Championships are the 2 years in between the Olympics. So this team came and played in the World Championships, and they won. But when they got up on the reviewing stand to get their medals, their jumpsuits were, some of them unzipped, some of them put their hand over their heart. They just were all over the place. And so when they got back to the locker room, Mike Krzyzewski went back into kind of a glassed office off to the side. And Jason Kidd, who was the father of the team, kind of the old member, got up on the bench and said, I want to talk to everybody here. And he took out his notebook with his standards, and he talked about, one of their things was respect for each other, respect for the company, for the team, and respect for the country. And then they opened it up, and when they won the Olympic gold medal, after having that conversation a couple years before, they were tight. Everybody did exactly the same thing. They all put their hand over, they all sang the national anthem. That's what a social contract is for. And it couldn't have been, I think Krzyzewski, he describes, he was back in his office just saying, that's how it should work. That every single member of the team should, if they're bought into that social contract, that will be the culture that we want. So that's really what I wanted to do, but I wanted to give you a couple of other things that help
Absolutely.
put this into a company. So
Okay.
one is pretty much everybody does this. I think they do either, you can call it an after action review. That's what we called it in the Army. You could call it a hot wash, anything you want. But what you're going to do is kind of review how things went. And so I want to give the folks viewing here, there's really four things. Only four things need to be in a hot wash. And they're all questions. The first question is, and this is after it's been done,
Okay.
what was supposed to happen? And I've used this and asked that question. And if there is confusion as to what was supposed to happen, whose fault is that? That
The
really is a
leader.
leadership fault, that it wasn't clear to everybody. The standards weren't clear. Maybe the mission wasn't clear, or any number of things. But I have been sitting around a table, and you can just do this. You just go around the horn. What was supposed to happen? And if you find there's a number of people that didn't have that at the beginning, how do you think you were going to get to the end and have it work out? So that's the
Right.
first one. The second question is, what could we have done better? What could we have done better? And a lot of that links to that first question. And by the
Hmm.
way, if the first question had people saying we didn't get it started right, I would own that right there if I was the leader. And so I got to start off, really that second question is, what could we have done better?
Yeah.
So, and then the third one is what went well. You got to have that. And sometimes I'd put the what went well before the, depending on the mood of the group. Um,
Right.
that, and then finally, let's put this someplace where we're not going to forget it. So
Mm.
let's try and keep track of these things that we could have done better. Because a lot of times you'll do an after action review, maybe, or a hot wash, and it'll be a notebook on a shelf that'll never get looked at again. So we were very adamant about looking at what had gone on before, learning from our own history. The
Yeah.
One of the other things that really goes to criticality, if you think about what is criticality, it is that reflex to critique, but it's also a way of giving feedback. And we've
Mm.
all had coaches and leaders that they would come in and they didn't use these words, we need to talk. I think that's something we as men and women, that's not a good 4 words to use, but it's okay to go sit on a footlocker or go and just say, how are things going? What do you
Mm.
think? Get their ideas. And then off of that, there's usually an opportunity to give some feedback, which is we're able to talk with them. And a lot of times your leaders are more experienced, but if I've met a leader that thinks they know everything, that is problematic.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be one of those leaders. We want to be one of those leaders that is going to take other people's opinions and listen really well, and then frame. I think one kind of leadership principle that I've learned is even if you think you know what the right way to go is, if you speak first, you're going to find a lot of people will just line up with you because you're the boss.
Mm.
So I would say, don't speak first. Ask questions first. Draw it out. There'll be some people that'll be really quiet and want to wait till everyone else has said something. You need to keep an eye on those people because a lot of times they have great ideas. They just have maybe more self-control than other
Right.
people. So I want to also introduce, that's feedback. That's where we've, and the AAR or the hot wash is really kind of a feedback mechanism. But there's another kind of feed, and that's called feed forward. And
Mm.
I want to introduce that for those that don't know what feed forward is. It's going through those, knowing that we're going to ask those questions, what was supposed to happen, what didn't go so well, what went well, and how are we going to keep this bubbling up, is that we would know about those questions. And before we ever started, whatever we're going to start,
Mm.
we start to ask those questions
Yeah.
and make sure, okay, before we leave this room, we haven't started the project, construction project, or whatever it is. I'm going to ask you at some point at the end, what was supposed to happen. So let's talk about what is supposed to happen right now. That's feed forward. And that's a great place because it's not critical of anybody, but it is informative, and you use the whole team to contribute to that. I found if I do the right feed forward, there's a lot less need for the feedback. And so just a little tip on that regard. And I would strongly encourage you to get into a mechanism where you can get feed forward and use
I
that
like
as
that.
much as you can. So
Yeah,
that's a
that
little
is
bit
great.
of how to go about it.
That's great advice. Thank you, General Van.
Sure.
Can you give our listeners an understanding what you've seen in it, whether it's your teams or organizations you've worked with, before they started the transformation process of building that balance of criticality? What were those teams like? And then, afterwards, as you saw them progress through and move closer to their goals, what did you see the change in those companies or
Yeah,
teams?
it's great. Saw a great change, and a lot of it having to do with this particular subject about criticality. And I'll throw in the nurturing along with that. But let me talk about two teams quickly. Or one would be the Corps of Engineers, because we went through the process.
Yeah.
We had 37,000 people, and I would say. Well, we have 45 districts and 12 divisions. Divisions are all commanded by generals, 45 districts by colonels. All of them went through this process, and a lot of them took their teams through this process. So it's pretty awesome. But here's what we kind of saw at the beginning of this before we went through this process. And these are just kind of my words. When I took over, what was I seeing? I was seeing, first of all, undue competition between organizations
Mm.
that were like organizations, where district commands, you could feel this competition, and some of it is about future promotions and other things. But how do we break that down so that there's not undue competition and there is strong support of each other? I think there was poor communication and certainly poor cross communications. What
Mm.
if one of those 45 districts had an issue, and because of our social contract, they were willing to share that around and tell people what they had done with it, how they fixed it, and so other people could learn without having to put
Mm.
their hand on the hot stove. So
Right.
that's that cross communications. I felt there was a lot of individuals over teams. Brings me back to the hockey team with Mike Eruzione. That
Wow.
who do you play for? Who do you play for? Who do you really play for? Um, One of the things that had become part of the culture when I first got there was really a tendency to be late to meetings. I'll put that
Hmm.
very nicely. And so I began to get to meetings 5 to 10 minutes early and established this little phrase, early was on time. That actually made it into our social contract because people would come, we could have good conversations, and we didn't just start with, okay, who's got the first slide? We started with going around and really having a little time with people so that we got to know them, build that relational capacity with them. So late start of meetings, too many meetings, decisions made at too high a level. Uh, every organization that I had growing up, I would almost always have to take a couple of minutes and explain to people when they came into me for a decision. I would assess, okay, that's the last time that level of decision needs to come to me. You make it, you tell me what you've done. And so that was it. And then there was I think a lack of accountability and ownership. So those are just some of the things that were not right. I would say that we had hoped that this would take care of. What were some of the desired outcomes? I think you could take all those and turn them into a social contract activity for
Yeah.
that. And so I know we don't have too much more time, Troy, but I would
That's,
like to take a company I've been working with for 8 years and just read off their social contract for people
yeah,
out there
absolutely.
that are interested in putting a social contract into effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
I worked with Morgan Corp for 8 years. I went to a meeting uh, actually this week with them. And the first thing they did, they shared a safety moment and they shared a social contract item that they wanted to focus on for that day. That's how it's done. It's part of their culture. It's become part of how they live. Here they are. Their first one is, and these aren't in any given orders expressly, act with integrity, strive for excellence, treat everyone with respect, be accountable to ourselves, to each other, and to our customers, communicate openly and honestly, value the experience and opinions of others, resolve conflicts in a timely manner, positive manner by focusing on issues, not emotions, and then finally celebrate success. And they have run a company that 8 years ago was $20 million, and today it's $250 million. Not a
Wow.
huge company, but as if you would talk to their leadership, they would tell you that a lot of it is due to this social contract and the
Well,
culture where we can, in the right way, we can correct those things that aren't right. We can discuss them and we'll decide together how we're going to fix things. So
awesome.
that's really, as they progress through the program, that's what they did. And I would say one of them is talk about your social contract often and talk
Okay.
about, and when you think of criticality, you think, okay, what's the best way to get to, because people receive criticality in different ways.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. So,
Well, awesome. General Van, thank you so much for the just the personal experiences that you shared and companies that you coached. But this was a great session. I do want to end though. I have three fireside chat questions that I want to ask you.
okay.
I think you've already answered this one, so it'll be quick. But what are your favorite behaviors or behavior to coach?
Yeah, I think these two that we did here, criticality and nurturing, and I'll
Yeah.
add another two. One is order and structure, and the other one's need for change. They also go together. Now, do we
Yeah.
need both of those kind of people? Could
Yes.
everyone be someone that is leading change all the time? Not necessary. You got to have the balance between
Yeah.
those people that have high order and structure and those people that can see somewhere that other people can't see. So I love to take on those. And they're really dual, if you will.
Yeah, right. They go hand in hand. You're right. What's your favorite productivity hack for leaders?
Yeah. I'll tell you something that is that I've used along, and I call it one touch.
Okay.
And I'll say a little example would be if you, Troy, if you and I were going to go out to lunch, we would leave this conversation with the place, the time, and exchange of phone numbers in case something came up that we had to change. But we would have all the facts we needed to go and do what we were going to do and only touch that once. How many times do we, oh, let's touch it again. I'll call you back. We'll decide on a place later or whatever.
Yep.
So, as much as possible. And it saves an enormous amount of time if you
Yeah.
can touch it one time. And I'll just tell you at a bigger scale, when I was chief of engineers, I was finding that people would do pre-briefs with about 5 different groups before they got to me. And I cut that down and said, you get 2 groups. So you got
Mm.
to get the right people together. Because if not, everybody changes it. The next person changes it.
Yeah.
They might change it back to what you wanted. How do you do it? I call that
Right.
one
Right.
touching as much as you can.
I like that. I like that. Okay, last one for you. The best leadership advice you've ever been given.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna drop a name here, and I don't mean to drop names, but I had the privilege. I was working about 4 levels under him. His name's Colin Powell. A lot of you know the name. Just
Yeah.
a tremendous leader. Was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then went on later to be the Secretary of State and other things. An amazing man. And so many times in meetings, you would think if there's anyone that could say, "Troy, I want you to do this," but that would assume we don't have a discussion about it. That would assume
Right.
that I know exactly what needs to be done. So there was a phrase that Colin Powell used a lot. Um, And he would even give a disclaimer. He said, "Now, I am not telling you to do this. I'm just asking you to think about it." And so his words were, "Have you thought about this?" And then he would draw from his experience. He would lay that out there and he would make sure, he says, "I don't know if this fits your situation or not, but I'm just throwing that out." That as a contribution from a leader is really helpful, I think. So
Yeah.
I stole that from him, stole a good idea, and used that a lot. So have you thought about this? And then I added another question with that. What are you thinking about as we think about how we're going to do this? And so you draw them in and you get
Wow.
pretty good solutions that way.
Wow. General Van, it was such an honor and a pleasure to spend this last 30 minutes with you. Thank you so much for joining us. And everybody online, thank you for tuning in. I know there's a handful of nuggets that General Van just gave us today, but please, you can visit our LinkedIn page or our website and hear this session again. I will have here in a second a QR code if you'd like to learn more about team assessments and how you can improve your team. Please scan the QR code and we'd be more than happy to talk with you. Again, General Van, thank you, sir.
Thank you,
And
Troy.
and thank everybody for joining us. Have a wonderful day.